John chapter 13. I'm going to read verses 31 to 35. New command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus replied, where I am going you cannot follow now, but you will follow later. And Peter, I think we'll stop there actually. That's far enough. I want to talk for a few minutes about outreach. This is our 90th year, and one of the things that we are trying to do is to look and say, how do we become more effective in our mission? How can we go out there with the good news of Jesus? Because we believe that what Jesus has shared with us should not be kept a secret. It's not meant to be something that's only for a closed group of people, but it's something that everybody should be able to hear and to decide for themselves on whether they believe it or not. But there are so many different ways in which we can present the good news of Jesus. So hence the whiteboard now, because what I'd like to do is just to pop up on the board, get your thinking caps on here. What different ways do people share? I mean, how many different types of evangelism do you know? And some of them have got names and some of them haven't got names, that are more descriptions of how you do it. So we just want to kind of put up on the board here a few things just to help us to think about different ways in which we can share the good news of Jesus. Okay, so let's, if you just sort of call out some things and we'll try and get them on the board as quickly as I can. Sorry? So talking to people, yeah, so just literally talking, isn't it? So, yep, just talking, sometimes one-to-one, that sort of thing. Yep, so simply talking. Sorry, it's... Example, right, okay.
Sharing scripture.
Okay, yep, so scripture. Spell. The word of God is living and active, sharper than a double-edged sword. Okay, so what else? Any other ways that you can think of in which people have shared the good news of Jesus? Singing, yeah, actually, yeah, that's good. So, okay, singing. Invitation. Margaret. Actions, okay. You don't see them very often, but what used to be called crusades. The Billy Graham style thing, one man comes and you fill a whole place. Yep, so you got that sort of evangelism. Mission, yep, okay. So, and I think Ivor, was that? Activities, okay. Sorry, who's that? Alpha, okay, yes, so there's sort of courses, aren't there? So like Alpha type courses, and there are so many different things. So I can put Alpha type courses.
My grandchildren like Messy Church.
Messy Church, yeah, so you've got sort of, so the Messy Church, stroke, children's children and families, really, isn't it? So, Margaret? Praying, yeah. Sorry. Online, yeah, absolutely. So, lots of different ways, and we'll probably stop there for now. But there are so many different ways that we could actually probably fill this board up with endless different ways. And now, of course, for the rest of the morning, you're going to be sitting there thinking, aren't you, of the next? Oh, I forgot to put that one up, and so. But as you can see, there are actually endless ways of sharing the good news about Jesus. And that's good because we want to be creative about this. One of the problems that we can have about sharing Jesus is that you actually kind of get this stereotypical idea of, what an evangelist is. And to be honest, it's not very helpful. And actually, it's very unrealistic usually. But there are lots of different things that you can do. I mean, sometimes you'll find, for instance, another one, street evangelism. People just going out in the streets. Now, what you find very often, of course, is that people just give them a wide berth and just walk past them and try and pretend they're not even there, that kind of thing. We've done some door-to-door evangelism where you just go and meet your neighbours and just turn up and share something with them. So that's another way of doing it. And there are so many different ways of sharing the good news of Jesus. Well, today what I want to look at is the greatest act of witness. The greatest act of witness, according to Jesus. What did Jesus say about how to share our faith? What is the best way of doing it? And if you look for prayer 90 this week, you'll find that John 13 and verse 35 is the verse for the week that we're going to be focusing on for our prayers. And I want to just kind of think into that a little bit more. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I was quite struck just recently that I get so many things come through the post, and everybody is trying to market something to me, or lots of places are trying to market to me. So they send to the church, please use our products. So how on earth are you going to catch the eye of a busy pastor who's getting 10 things every day coming through, landing on his desk saying, please use our stuff? And, I have to give Christianity.org.uk 10 out of 10 for catching my attention, because they sent this leaflet through to me just recently, almost effortless evangelism. My goodness, that got my attention. Almost effortless, because actually for many of us, when we look at these things here, we kind of look and think to ourselves, wow, that's going to take a lot of energy and time and sometimes courage to go about sharing Jesus in these ways and telling other people the good news about him. So when it says almost effortless, that got my attention. Then I noticed it said almost. Okay, and you think to yourself, yeah, but what does almost mean? And we've got down there online, and this is basically online. So what they want you to do is basically to put the link to their website where they would explain the gospel. So anybody who visits our website and sees that and says, I want to know more about Christianity, click the link, goes to their website, and they will explain it all. That's why it's almost effortless. But it's also very passive. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that I'm relying on somebody, first of all, visiting our website, and then I'm relying further that that person who visits our website is going to click the link to Christianity.org.uk. Now, I'm kind of thinking to myself that when I get my Google statistics that come through every month, It's quite amazing to see that something like, these are, not exact figures, but genuine kind of area that the figures will state. Something like 10,000 people saw your website this month. 10,000 people? Wow, that sounds promising, doesn't it? Okay, so 10,000 people saw my website. I'm not actually sure what that means, because I don't think we got 10,000 visits last time. What I think it means is that 10,000 people did a Google search, which probably had something like Merton in it, and somewhere in the list, probably on page 5, was Merton Park Baptist Church. That's probably all that means. So that's not really that helpful, is it? But it's okay, because Google then will tell us that so many people visited the website. And so it might say something like, 900 people visited your website. Now that's actually not so bad. And sometimes, once it gets to 1,000, it just says over 1,000. But I think last month it was something like 975 people visited your website, apparently. I have no way of knowing if that's true or not, but I'll trust them on that. Then it says, genuine, absolutely accurate figure, one person asked for directions. Oh dear. So we got 10,000 people who apparently saw our website, nearly 1,000 who actually visited the website apparently, and of those, one person asked for directions. And then you realise, of course, that actually that one person who asked for directions may actually have been asking for directions to the bus stop, possibly, which is called Merton Park Baptist Church. I'm being cynical. Perhaps they did ask for directions to get here. And sometimes it says, tells you how many people searched for your telephone number, stuff like that. But you see what I'm saying? That it's very passive. And of the thousands and thousands of potential people, actually very few are likely to end up clicking on that link. Not saying it shouldn't, we'll check it out and see if we're happy with that, and maybe we will include it. But the point is that we want to be a bit more proactive than that, because we think that the good news of Jesus is worth sharing, so much so that we don't want to just rely on the off chance that somebody might happen to click a link. It can be part of it. But we need to be really sharing Jesus. And Jesus said to his disciples, the way to do it is to do it through love. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. As I have loved you? Can we just think about that for a minute? How did Jesus love us? We've spoken a lot about that this morning already throughout our worship. We talked about the cost that Jesus went to in order to meet us, to have relationship with us. We talked about the fact that he went all the way to the cross at Calvary, even though he didn't deserve to go there. We talked about the fact that he then suffered a death, a very painful, cruel death. Some have suggested that it was among the most, if not the most cruel form of execution ever devised by mankind. And let's be honest about it, we have come up with some pretty cruel ways of killing people. It was prolonged, it was painful, excruciatingly so. And people eventually, at least normally, they would drown actually on the cross. Their lungs would fill with liquid to the point where they couldn't breathe anymore. I'm told that also becomes very, very painful as you get shorter and shorter of breath, till eventually the heart stops. Actually, Jesus didn't die in that way. That's very clear. You notice that when Jesus was about to die, the last thing he did before he died, do you know what he did? Anyone remember what he did? The last thing he did before he died. Even after that. Father, forgive them. Yeah. He shouted in a loud voice, it says. He shouted in a loud voice. My God, why have you forsaken me? If your lungs are filled with liquid to the point that you're actually drowning, there is no way you can shout. You can't even speak. So what happened to Jesus was that at the appropriate time, he gave up his spirit, it says. He gave it up. It was his choice. So even though they crucified him, they didn't kill him. When he was ready to die, when the work was done, it is finished, then he gave it up. He says, I choose when I give it up and when I take up my life again. And God raised him back to life again on the third day. His timing, his choice. He was in control the whole time. Yeah? But it was all about him saying, I am prepared to go to the cross. I am prepared to die for you. I am prepared to allow you to do the things you're going to do to me, but I am still in control, absolutely, right up to the very end. I'm in control. But that's the extent of his love for us. Now think about this. Before he came to this earth, and we'll think about the humble circumstance in just a moment, but before he came to this earth, Jesus enjoyed absolute glory, power, authority, majesty, crowned a king. He sat there at the right hand of the Father. He was there, the Godhead in perfect harmony together. And at some point, and we don't understand this because God is outside of time, and so is there actually a point anyway because there is no time? But there was this agreement amongst the Godhead, and again, with the Godhead, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? We talk about God being three persons in one, and so they had this conversation together and said, what are we going to do about this earth that has been so messed up? About all the wrong that's come in, about all the evil that's come into this world. How are we going to deal with it? And they were unanimous in their decision. One of us must go and live as a man. One of us has to go there in human form to live the life that they lived, but to live it perfectly, to do nothing wrong. And then, even though they deserve, I talked about earlier, didn't I? Why didn't God just screw it all up and start again? Well, in a sense, he says, rather than screwing it all up, literally putting us to an eternal punishment, he says, what we need to do is to rescue them out of that. That's what they deserve, but let's rescue them. God is a God of righteousness. He does nothing wrong. He's a God of justice, which means he does everything right. And he says that justice must prevail. They've messed up. They broke the rules, and therefore they need to be punished for it. We all know about justice and righteousness. We've learnt that from small children. I remember a friend once saying to me about his children, he said, what it's like with children. He said, you say to them, come on, I want you to go and do such and such a thing. Go and tidy your room. No, I'm not going. If you don't go and tidy your room, you're going to be in such hot water. Go and tidy your room. No. I'm going to count to 10. And if you haven't got into your room and started tidying it, boy, are you in trouble. 1. The child stands there. 2, defiance now, crosses the arms. 3, 4. He says, now the mistake that a lot of parents make is they get to 9, and what do they do next? 9.5. And the kid knows, I've won. The parent moved. He says, I don't do that. He says, my kids know that after 9 comes 10. And if they haven't done it by 10, boy, oh boy, they're in trouble, because whatever I threaten to do, I will do. And he said, it's amazing. They still wait until 9, but after 9, they're gone. They're gone. And God says that because I'm a God of justice, I have to act. I can't get to 9 and say 9.5, 9 3/4. He says, I have to do something. And so, between them, in this Godhead that we don't fully understand, they say, if one of us lives the perfect life and then takes the punishment that they should have received, that will pay the price. The debt is cancelled. As long as, now here's the crazy bit about this. I'm going to call it crazy. It's the crazy bit about it because it's so simple, and yet it's something that the majority of people will reject. All we have to do is believe, trust in God, ask him for forgiveness, and start following him. So simple. And yet people say, I don't even believe there was a God, number 1. Number 2, Jesus, well, he was a great historical character. He was a good man. Number 3 is that, well, I'm not sure who Jesus was, whether he lived or not, but maybe there is a God out there somewhere, but there are many ways to God. There are lots of different gods, or maybe all the gods are the same, so there are lots of different ways, but you eventually get to the same God, and not sure what route I'm going to... All sorts of excuses. Yeah, Jesus said very clearly, no one gets to the Father except by me. I'm the way, the truth, the life. The only way. I'm the doorway. I'm the gateway. You can't get to Jesus except through me. And when we understand that and accept that, and then say, I'm prepared to trust him, that Jesus, and actually it's been pointed out, and I don't know how they actually work these things out, but I'm just going to take it at face value. And, you can do so if you want to, or you can reject it, I don't mind. But they say that there is more historical evidence that Jesus walked on the face of the earth than there was that Julius Caesar existed. But who doubts that Julius Caesar existed? I don't know anybody who doubts that. But if it's true that there's more historical, and we're not talking historical here, but more historical evidence that Jesus walked on the face of the earth, why do people say, I don't even believe that he exists? That shouldn't be in our minds. The question is not, did Jesus exist? But was Jesus who he claimed to be? That's the one we've got to wrestle with. And if Jesus was indeed the one that he claimed to be, then we have a duty and a right to follow him. A duty because that's what's expected of us. A right because he's given us the ability to follow him and to receive all the benefits that he comes to bring. But people still reject and object and come up with all sorts of things. But why? Well, when you start to analyse and to think into why people object to Jesus and his teaching, you find one thing comes through again and again, and it's this. It's self, it's pride, it's I want to do things my way. I want to rule my own life. I don't want to come under his authority. I don't like what Jesus is teaching, therefore I want to do it my way. That's what it's all about. And we as Christians have been told to go out into all the world and to take the good news of Jesus to all creation, to everyone. to cross every boundary. National boundaries, cultural boundaries, whatever they might be, that we've got to go there and take the good news. And that's why we've got this huge array, this plethora of ways in which we can reach people, because so often I get people come and try and convince me this is the latest, greatest way to reach people for the kingdom of God. The truth is actually probably that none of these are absolutely perfect, and some ways will connect with one person better than another. You know, and that's fairly obvious, isn't it, really? So we need probably lots of different things here. But look, there's a problem. There's a problem, because when we start to employ these ways, and it becomes, if we're not careful, a mechanical thing that we're doing. We're just going through the motions. We've got the handbook in front of us that tells us this is how you do it. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And if you follow this formula, then everybody you speak to or come into contact with will indeed become a believer and follower of Jesus. But the truth is that doesn't happen, does it? And Jesus said, they know that you're Christians. They know that you're believers. They will know that you're my followers by your love. Love is the key. By this, a new command, verse 34, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Jesus gave up everything, and we must lay down our lives for each other too. But what does that mean? We need to explore that, don't we? We just said that Jesus was crucified, that he came to this world, he gave up his glory, he came down into humble circumstances, he was born in a stable, he lived a lowly life. He was born into a very lowly, ordinary family, nothing privileged there. He probably had quite a difficult upbringing. As a family, I'm sure they struggled through poverty and just generally they weren't in a good place in history. And yet Jesus endured all of that, but that wasn't the end of it, because as he became an adult, he continued to live an austere life. He didn't go and declare, hey, I'm king of the Jews, give me my crown and my palace. But he said, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have their nests, but the Son of Man, referring to himself, has nowhere to lay down his head. He said, I'm homeless. I'm a wanderer. I go from place to place, and whoever gives me a bed for the night, I take it. That's how Jesus lived. So is that what he's asking us to do? Is he asking us to go all the way to be crucified as he was? Is that where this is leading? Well, probably not. You might be relieved to hear. Probably not. But what Scripture says in another place is, having explained that we need to give our lives as living sacrifices, as to give them up for each other, it goes on to tell us that, therefore, it says, those of you that have got plenty, you need to give to those who've got nothing or little. So we can sacrifice in that way. In other words, that we're actually kind of sharing ours, and when I get a benefit, I like somebody else to benefit too. So look, to try and put some form to all of this, I've thought of several areas here that we want to look at as being the greatest witness. What does it mean to experience the love of God? The love that Jesus showed us. What does it actually mean? Well, the first thing I would say is that we need to celebrate God's great love for us, for you. Celebrate that love. When you celebrate God's love for his people, as we've been doing this morning, we've been singing songs that have spoken about all the great sacrifice that he made, the fact that he held nothing back for us. Well, we don't just do it in singing, do we? We do it in every aspect of life. We can stand up and we can just say how grateful that I am. Sometimes in a conversation, I'm just so thankful that Jesus died for my sins. That even though I may not be perfect and I do things wrong and I mess up sometimes, that I know that my sin is forgiven 100%. There is absolutely no question about it. I don't go around feeling guilty in any way because I am forgiven. And if you know that you're forgiven, and if you know that what that means and what you have been saved from and to, that will change your whole outlook. We no longer become coy about sharing our faith, coy about saying I'm a follower of Jesus, but very boldly and proudly almost, we say, I belong to Jesus. Celebrate God's great love. You see, what Jesus said here in John 13:35 is that people will know about him, and it becomes a witness when they see his love being demonstrated and shared among us. And therefore, we love because God first loved us. When we realize how much he poured out upon us when we deserve nothing, it changes our attitude. So the second thing I would say is that we celebrate God's love for us, but then we love God with all of our being. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, your body. Every part of your being is for him. That he is the first one you consider in everything that you do. He has my heart, first of all, above everyone else. And I mean everyone else. So you think of the person closest to you, who has your heart? That's a question we need to ask. And say, okay, humanly speaking, this person has my heart. And if you're a married person, I hope that's your spouse. They have your heart. It may be somebody else. You may not be married. You might have children. You equally share your heart with them. It may be that it's a parent or somebody else who's very close to you. They have your heart. But can you honestly say that if it came to it and you had to choose, who would it be? That person or Jesus? Because that's the question that we've got to ask. And we have to say at some point, if we were ever put on the spot and said, you are forced, you can only give your heart one way or the other. That's the decision. Which is it going to be? Is it going to be Jesus? Because Jesus says, I want your heart. I want all of you. I want your mind. Therefore, I control the way you think. And that's not as bad as it sounds. This is not some kind of brainwashing we're talking about. This is not some kind of realignment of sort of therapy. No, this is not about that. This is just about having the mind of Christ in us. The more we get to know him and understand him, the more he has our heart, the more we have his heart. The more that we end up wanting to please him, the more that we realize we've received from him. And as a result of all of that, we find that the whole of our being is transformed, that we just want to only do the things that please him and give honor and glory to him. And you'll find that then the body follows. That our bodies become instruments of worship and honor and glory to God instead of instruments to dishonor him and for sin. Love for God's people, I suppose that's at the heart really of this verse, isn't it? They'll know that you're my followers, that you're Christians, by your love for each other. Do you have a real deep concern for the people of God? Do you love each other? Do you really love each other? Because he says that's actually what's going to happen. Because you see, the people in the world around us, they sometimes put up facades and they pretend things and but it's not real. But in the church, one of the amazing things that I often marvel at about the church is this, that the church is made up of people, a vast array of diverse people. Some from one country, some from another. Sometimes from one continent to another continent. We speak different languages. We may have different levels of education, different interests. Some might be very wealthy and others really struggling financially. We're all so very different. And yet the amazing thing is that we can all come into church and say that we are one together. That we're part of one family, one body. That we're all together as one people. And I don't see that happening anywhere else in society. I really don't. There are lots of clubs and groups you can go and belong to, and you can pretty much guarantee that when you walk into them that the people that will be there will be all of, very similar. There's an awful lot of similarity. There's some commonality between them. So if you go and join a football club, you can pretty much guarantee that everybody there is mad about football. That they love the game. And most of them will probably love just getting out there on the pitch and kicking the ball around. And if you join the knitting club, I don't know if there is such a thing, but anyway, there you go. If you join the knitting club, the chances are that the people in the knitting club are all going to be very similar in their tastes. And dare I say it, and I know this is stereotyping, but I doubt very much that they're going to enjoy running around the football pitch. Somehow it just doesn't go, does it? I guess it's dangerous to be knitting and playing football. That's probably what it is. So don't try it. But do you see what I mean? But when you come into the church, people from all over, different places, different backgrounds, yet we can all love one another. And our commonality is Jesus, who rises above all of the divides and the barriers that we put in place. So love God's people. Love them dearly. Some of them are harder to love than others, I know. But keep working at it. Keep working at it. Love them as you love yourself. How much do you love yourself? That's how much you love these other people. I'm not saying it's easy. In fact, I'm going to tell you it's going to be hard. But we have to do it. I'm going to throw something in now that may surprise you. And I'm going to have to turn to some scriptures to back this one up before I get rotten tomatoes thrown at me. Now you're wondering, aren't you? I'm going to go to John's letters. As well as John's gospel, we have 3 letters from John near the back of the Bible. And his first letter, 1 John chapter 2, is where I'm going to show you. Because my fourth one is this: do not love the world. Wow. Did you really say that? Do not love the world. Whatever that means. But let me just read to you from 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 to 17. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. That's pretty stark, isn't it? For everything in the world, the cravings of the sinful man, the lust of his eyes, the boasting of what he has and does, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever. In other words, when it says do not love the world, it's saying the things of this world, the appetite that we get, which comes from the old sinful nature. It says reject those things. We have to be different. We have to be set apart and separate We're a holy people, and a holy people means people who have been set apart for God. So don't get worked up in the cravings of this world, the I wants, I must have, I can't live without, which are all usually nonsense. We live for Christ, not for the things of this world. We live here. We're resident here, but we're aliens as well. That we're actually going to be moving on to somewhere that Jesus says, I've gone to prepare for you. He says, don't get too attached to this world. I've got something better for you. But look, I want to just add to that. If that's my fourth point, do not love the world. Let me put a 4B in, because it's connected. But do love your enemies. Love the people. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's your enemy, but it's the extreme, isn't it? The Bible makes it very clear that we are to love our enemies. Now, if you can love your enemies, surely you can love everybody in between. So let's start with that extreme there. Love your enemies. The Bible's very clear. So we don't love the cravings of the sinfulness of this world and the things that people crave after here, but we do love the people that are in it. And why do we do that? Because God loves the people in this world. God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son. When it says he loved the world, it doesn't mean the structure of this world. It's talking about the people of this world. What he was interested in was the people. The only thing out of this world, the only things that will ever see all of eternity are people. Everything else will be destroyed. Only people will last for all eternity. And that's not just the good people. We're talking about the good, those who followed Christ, and also those who've rejected him. All will live for eternity. The difference is, do you live for eternity with Jesus? Or do you suffer the eternal punishment that he promises when he gets to number 10? That's not 10 Downing Street. Number 10 is 9:10, okay? Just to connect that with what we said earlier. Love your enemies. If you can love them, if you can love the people who hate you, you can love anybody. So work at it. Finally, I just want to say this, that if you get love right, everything else will fall into place. That's why Jesus said it's important. John, who wrote the Gospel of John and wrote the epistles, the letters later on, this obviously made a very profound impression upon him, that he remembered that as he sat at that Last Supper around that table and Jesus said to them, a new command I give to you, love one another. And he never forgot it. He was a relatively young man at that stage. But many, many years later, as he wrote his letters, he's an old man, very old. And yet he's able to say this in chapter 3. And to be honest, you could read through the whole of 1 John and you'll find this coming up again and again. I'm just going to pick out an example of it. This is the message you heard from the beginning. You see, right from the beginning, meaning the beginning of when you came to faith, the beginning of the gospel. We should love one another. Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own actions were evil and his brothers were righteous. Do not be surprised, my brothers, if the world hates you. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers. Anyone who does not love remains in death. Again, quite forceful words here. Anyone who hates his brother, and he's talking about a fellow believer here. Okay, so it's not talking about your sibling. He's talking about here your fellow believer, male, female. Anyone who hates his brother or sister, in other words, is a murderer. He says, you're just like Cain. You're no different. And now you know that no murderer has eternal life in him. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. If anyone has material possessions, we made reference to this earlier, but let me read it. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need, but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Dear children, let us not love with words and tongue, but with actions. There it is. Actions and in truth. This then is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence, whenever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. And so he goes on. Love one another. He said it is the greatest act of witness. If people can see that there is something genuine in us, how we relate to each other, that will make all the difference. All the difference. You've probably got some work to do. I've got some work to do. There are people that I find difficult to love, even though I should do. I need to go and work on that. And I suspect if you search your own hearts that you'll also find there are people that are difficult to love. Go and work on it. Go and work on it. Go and ask for his help. And look, if you're finding it really difficult, ask this question. Go and turn it into a prayer. Go and come before the Father, kneel before him and say, how hard was it to love me? How hard? Think about all that you've done to offend God and ask, how hard was it? Think about how you became a Christian and then you let him down again. Lord, how hard was it to love me? Even though I've been such a failure. Lord, did you ever think about giving up on me? It's a question, isn't it? Have you ever thought about giving up on somebody? When God sets his affection upon you, he never thinks about giving up on you. He who began a good work in you will carry it through to completion until the day of Christ. That's the promise. That's the promise. We've got work to do. But if you get love right, everything else will fall into place. Let's pray.